The spit landed on Grace Mitchell's chest. Warm. Deliberate. The 19-year-old boy smirked as his friends erupted in laughter. Grace stood frozen, the coffee pot trembling in her hand. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply whispered, "I'll get you a new order, sir." What Brandon Ashworth didn't notice, what his expensive education never taught him to see, were the 50 men at the counter. 50 men in leather cuts. 50 men who had killed for their country. 50 men who had just watched him spit on the only person who ever treated them like human beings. If you believe in justice, respect, and second chances, subscribe to this channel and follow this story to the very end. Comment below. Tell us what city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. Grace Mitchell wiped down the same spot on the counter she'd wiped 1,000 times before. Her hands moved automatically the way they always did after 8 years of 12-hour shifts. Her feet ached. Her back screamed. But her face showed nothing but calm. More coffee Steele. The massive man at the counter pushed his cup forward without looking up from his newspaper. Marcus Steele Thornton was 62 years old, built like a refrigerator, and had a beard that had gone gray during his 3rd tour in Vietnam. Most people crossed the street when they saw him coming. Grace filled his cup and smiled. "You've been staring at the same page for 20 minutes. Bad news." Steele finally looked up. His eyes, cold to everyone else, softened when they met hers. "Just thinking." "About what? About how you always know when something's wrong." Grace laughed quietly. 8 years of pouring your coffee. I know your moods better than my own." Behind Steele, 49 other men sat scattered throughout Thunder Road Diner. Some played cards, some argued about motorcycle engines, some simply sat in silence, grateful for a place where no one looked at them like criminals. The Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club had claimed this diner as their sanctuary 5 years ago. Not because the food was exceptional, it wasn't, but because of the woman who served it. Demon Steele's sergeant-at-arms slammed his fist on the table. "I'm telling you, a 72 shovelhead will outrun any of that Japanese garbage." "You're out of your mind," another biker shot back. "That old iron can't handle, boys." Grace appeared between them, refilling both cups. "If I have to clean blood off these tables again, I'm charging you extra." Both men immediately quieted. Demon, a man who had once beaten 3 attackers unconscious with a pool cue, actually looked embarrassed. "Sorry, Grace." "Don't be sorry. Just don't break my diner." She moved away, and Demon watched her go. "That woman's got more authority than any commanding officer I ever had." Steele nodded slowly. "That's because she earned it." Grace pushed through the kitchen door and leaned against the wall. Just 30 seconds. She just needed 30 seconds where no one needed anything from her. Her phone buzzed. She already knew what it was. Shady Pines Care Facility glowed on the screen. Her heart dropped. She answered immediately. "Hello." "Ms. Mitchell. This is Nurse Patterson. I wanted to update you on your mother's condition." Grace closed her eyes. "Is she okay?" "She's stable. But she had another episode this morning. Didn't recognize any of the staff. Became quite agitated." "Did she hurt herself?" No. We managed to calm her down. But Ms. Mitchell, I need to discuss something with you. The facility administrator wanted me to remind you that your account is significantly behind." Grace's jaw tightened. "How behind?" 3 months. I'm sorry to bring this up, but if payment isn't received by the end of next week, we'll have to discuss alternative arrangements. Grace knew what that meant. State care, overcrowded rooms, staff who didn't have time to learn patients' names. "I'll figure it out," Grace said. "I always do." I know this is difficult. Your mother talks about you on her good days. She's very proud of you. Grace's voice cracked slightly. Does she remember who I am on those good days? The silence on the other end told her everything. I'll get you the money, Grace said firmly. Thank you for calling. She hung up and pressed her palms against her eyes. $12,000. 3 months behind. Where was she supposed to find $12,000? The kitchen door swung open. Manny the cook stuck his head in. You okay, Grace? She straightened immediately, forcing a smile. Fine. Just needed a minute. Take all the time you need. It's slow out there anyway. But Grace was already moving past him. Slow doesn't pay the bills. At 2:47 p.m., the convoy arrived. Grace heard them before she saw them engines that purred instead of roared the sound of money rather than power. Through the window, she watched 4 black SUVs pull into the parking lot. Escalades, the kind with tinted windows and chrome that had never seen dirt. The bikers noticed, too. Conversations quieted. Eyes shifted toward the door. Steele set down his coffee cup. Well, this should be interesting. The door swung open, and they walked in like they owned the place. 6 teenagers, 5 boys, and a girl, all wearing clothes that cost more than Grace made in a month. Designer sunglasses. Watches that gleamed. Attitudes that screamed, "My father will hear about this." Leading them was a boy who immediately made Grace's instincts tighten. Tall. Handsome in that catalog model way. Dark hair perfectly styled. And eyes that looked at everything like it existed solely for his entertainment. Brandon Ashworth had never been told no in his entire life. His father, Richard Ashworth, was an oil magnate worth billions a man, whose name appeared in newspapers next to words like influential and powerful. His mother had died when he was young, and his father had compensated with money instead of attention. The result was a 19-year-old who genuinely believed other people weren't quite real. Oh my God, the girl with them laughed, looking around the diner. This place is like a museum of poverty. Vintage, one of the boys corrected with a smirk. That's what poor people call it, vintage. They erupted in laughter. The bikers at the counter didn't react. They just watched. Grace approached with menus. Welcome to Thunder Road. I'm Grace. Can I start you folks off with some drinks? Brandon didn't look at her. He was scrolling through his phone. Yeah, whatever. Water, the expensive kind. We just have regular water, sir. Now he looked up. His eyes traveled over her slowly, not with attraction, but with assessment, like he was calculating her net worth and finding it laughable. Regular water, he repeated. Of course you do. Fine, whatever. Grace kept her smile steady. And for the rest of you? The orders came rapid-fire, complicated, condescending. One boy wanted a specific brand of sparkling water they didn't carry. The girl wanted a salad with exactly 7 modifications. Another boy kept calling Grace sweetheart in a tone that made the word sound like an insult. Through it all, Grace nodded, wrote, and smiled. This wasn't her first difficult table. It wouldn't be her last. When she walked away, Brandon's voice carried clearly across the diner. Did you see her shoes? I think my dog's bed cost more than her entire outfit. More laughter. Grace's pen pressed harder against her notepad, but she didn't turn around. At the counter, Demon's hands had curled into fists. Steele! I see them. I want you to sit there and drink your coffee. Demon's jaw clenched, but he obeyed. Steele hadn't survived 3 wars by acting without thinking. He watched. He waited. He calculated. Grace returned with their drinks, distributing them with practiced efficiency. As she set Brandon's water down, he grabbed her wrist. "This glass is dirty." Grace looked at the glass. It was spotless. "I'm sorry, sir. Let me get you a new one." "You should have checked before you brought it. Don't they train you people?" "You people?" Grace absorbed the words like a punch she'd learned to take. "I apologize. I'll be right back." She returned with a new glass. Brandon made a show of inspecting it, holding it up to the light, finally nodding like he was granting her permission to exist. "Better. See, that wasn't so hard." Grace placed their food orders and retreated to the kitchen. Manny was watching her with concern. "That table giving you trouble? Nothing I can't handle." "You say that every time, Grace. One of these days, I'll still handle it." She grabbed the plates he'd prepared. "Because that's what I do." The food came out perfectly. Manny was a genius with a grill, a former Marine who'd found peace in the rhythm of cooking. Every burger was exactly right. Every side was precisely prepared. Brandon looked at his plate like someone had served him garbage. "What is this?" Grace's stomach tightened. "Your bacon cheeseburger, sir. Just like you ordered." "I ordered it medium rare. This looks medium." "I can have the kitchen?" The kitchen already failed once. Brandon picked up the burger, took one bite, and made an exaggerated gagging sound. "Oh my God. This is disgusting. Do you people even have health inspections?" His friends laughed. One was already filming on his phone. Grace reached for the plate. "Let me get you a new one. No charge." "No charge?" Brandon laughed. "Like I care about the charge, I could buy this entire restaurant. I could buy this whole town." "I understand, sir. You understand." His voice rose. "You understand what exactly? What it's like to actually have standards. What it's like to expect basic competence." The diner had gone completely silent. Even the jukebox seemed to sense the tension, the current song fading just as Brandon's tirade escalated. Grace kept her voice steady. "I understand that you're unhappy with your meal, and I want to make it right." "Make it right." Brandon stood up, towering over her. "You want to make it right? You want to know what would make it right?" He grabbed the burger, held it up, and dropped it on the floor at her feet. "Pick it up." Grace stared at the burger on the floor, then at Brandon. "Sir," I said, "pick it up. That's what servants do, right? They pick things up." His friends had stopped laughing. Even they seemed uncertain now, glancing at each other at the bikers who had all turned to watch. Grace bent down slowly. Her hands didn't shake. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. She picked up the burger, placed it on the plate, and straightened. "I'll bring you a new one." "Wait." Brandon's hand shot out, gripping her arm again. Harder this time. "I'm not done. Please let go of my arm, sir. Or what you'll call the police. You'll sue me." He laughed. "Do you know who my father is? Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" At the counter. Steele set down his coffee cup with a soft click. The sound was barely audible, but every biker in the room heard it. They all went still. Grace spoke calmly. "I know exactly who I'm talking to, sir. A customer who deserves good service. Now please, let go of my arm." Brandon leaned closer. His breath smelled like expensive mouthwash and entitlement. "Say please again. I liked how that sounded. Say it again like you mean it." "Please." Brandon smiled. It was the smile of someone who had won every battle in his life, who expected to win every battle that remained. "See, that wasn't so, Brandon." One of his friends, a nervous-looking boy with glasses, spoke up. Maybe we should just go. Shut up, Derek. Brandon didn't take his eyes off Grace. I'm teaching this woman something important. I'm teaching her about the natural order of things. Grace met his eyes. In that moment, she made a decision. She could fight. She could scream. She could throw the plate in his face and deal with the consequences. But she thought about her mother, about the $12,000, about Shady Pines and their alternative arrangements. May I please bring you a new burger, sir? Brandon's smile widened. He released her arm. Much better. See how easy that was? Grace turned to walk away. She had taken exactly 3 steps when Brandon's voice stopped her cold. Actually, wait. Come back here. She turned. Sir, I changed my mind. I don't want a new burger. He picked up his water glass, examined it, and then slowly, deliberately poured it onto the floor. Clean that up first. The water spread across the linoleum, soaking toward Grace's worn shoes. She stared at the puddle, then at Brandon, then at the faces of his friends, some amused, some uncomfortable one, still filming. Behind Brandon, 50 bikers sat in absolute silence. Steele's eyes had gone cold. Demon's knuckles were white against the counter. Throughout the diner, men who had faced death were watching a teenage boy torture a woman for sport. Grace knelt down. She pulled the rag from her apron and began to wipe. Good, Brandon said. That's better. That's where you belong. She kept wiping. Her face showed nothing. But inside, something was breaking, something she had protected for 30 years of learning to survive in a world that had never given her anything. You know what? Brandon looked at his friends, playing to his audience. I think she needs more motivation. Throw your drinks too. Brandon, Derek started. I said throw them. 2 of the boys hesitated. The girl laughed nervously and tossed her soda. It splashed across the floor, across Grace's hands, across her apron. Grace kept wiping. The rag was soaked now, useless, but she kept wiping. More, Brandon commanded. Another drink hit the floor, then another. Grace wiped. Her movements had become mechanical. Her eyes had gone somewhere far away. Steele began to rise from his seat. Demon grabbed his arm. Steele. Not yet. That's enough. I know, but not yet. Wait for it. Steele's jaw was granite. Wait for what? Demon nodded toward Brandon. For him to cross the line. He hasn't crossed it. Not all the way, not yet, but he will. His type always does. Grace finished wiping. She stood slowly. Her uniform soaked her hands sticky with soda. She looked at Brandon with eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by cruelty anymore. Is there anything else I can get you, sir? Brandon stared at her. Something flickered across his face. Disappointment, maybe, that she hadn't broken, that she hadn't given him the satisfaction of tears. Yeah, he said slowly. There is one more thing. He hawked loudly, deliberately gathering saliva in his mouth. The diner held its breath. Brandon spit directly onto Grace's chest. The glob of saliva landed on her uniform, warm and vile, sliding slowly downward. His friends erupted in shocked laughter. The boy with the phone captured every second. Grace stood perfectly still. Her hands didn't move to wipe it away. Her face didn't change. She simply looked at Brandon with an expression he had never seen before. Not anger, not despair, but something deeper. Something that almost looked like pity. I'll get you a new burger, she whispered. Sir. She turned and walked toward the kitchen. Every step was measured. Every movement was controlled. She pushed through the kitchen door and disappeared. Brandon turned to his friends, triumphant. "Did you see that? Did you see her face? That was—" A chair scraped against the floor. Brandon turned. Steele was standing. All 6'4" of him, 260 pounds of muscle and scar tissue. Behind him, 49 other men were rising to their feet. The diner suddenly felt very, very small. "Son," Steele said quietly, "I think you and I need to have a conversation." Brandon's smile flickered. "Who the hell are you?" Steele walked forward. His boots were the only sound in the room. Thud, thud, thud. "I'm the man who's about to explain something your daddy's money couldn't teach you." Brandon looked at his friends. They had all taken a step backward. Derek was already edging toward the door. "My father will destroy you," Brandon said, but his voice had lost its edge. "Do you know who Richard Ashworth is?" Steele stopped directly in front of him, close enough that Brandon could see every line in the older man's face, every story written in his scars. "I know exactly who Richard Ashworth is," Steele said. "I also know who you are. The question is, do you—" Brandon's throat moved as he swallowed. "This is assault. You're threatening me. That's illegal." Steele smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I haven't touched you, son. Haven't threatened you. Just asked you a question." He leaned closer. "But since you mentioned assault, what do you think spitting on someone is?" Brandon's face went pale. Behind Steele, 50 men formed a wall. Leather cuts, tattoos, scars from battles most people couldn't imagine. These weren't thugs. These were warriors, and every single one of them was looking at Brandon like he was something they'd scraped off their boots. "Here's what's going to happen." Steele said, his voice soft as a prayer and hard as iron. "You're going to walk out that door. You're going to get in your fancy car. And tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. sharp, you're going to come back here." "Why would I—" "You're going to come back here and you're going to work. Not as a customer, as an employee. You're going to learn what that woman does every single day. You're going to learn what it means to serve people who treat you like dirt." Brandon laughed, but it sounded hollow. "You can't make me do anything." Steele nodded slowly. "You're right. I can't make you, but I can promise you this: if you don't show up tomorrow, 50. Iron wolves are going to ride to your father's house. We're going to knock on his door, and we're going to show him the video your friend just took." Brandon's head snapped toward Derek, who was still holding his phone. "That's right," Steele said. "We're going to show him what his son does when no one important is watching. We're going to show every country club, every business partner, every news outlet that might be interested in the character of a potential governor's son." The color drained completely from Brandon's face. "You wouldn't. You? Try me." Silence stretched between them. Brandon's friends had all backed against the wall. The girl was crying quietly. Derek looked like he might vomit. Finally, Brandon's shoulders dropped. Just slightly, but enough. "Fine," he spat. "One day, I'll come for 1 day. 1 week? That's insane. I'm not— 1 week!" Steele's voice left no room for negotiation. "And Brandon, if I hear that you've treated Grace or anyone else with anything less than complete respect during that week, you'll be washing dishes until your trust fund runs out." Brandon stared at him with pure hatred. But underneath the hatred was something else. Something he had never felt before in his privileged life. Fear. 6 a.m., Steele repeated. "Don't be late." He stepped aside, creating a path to the door. Brandon walked through it slowly, his friends scrambling after him. Not one of them looked back. The door swung shut. The engines of the SUVs roared to life. And then, finally, Silence. Steele turned to face his brothers. His face was grim. Demon. Make sure they actually leave. Demon nodded and headed for the door. Steele walked toward the kitchen. He pushed through the door quietly and found Grace sitting on an overturned bucket, her head in her hands. She wasn't crying. She was just sitting there perfectly still, like a machine that had finally run out of power. Grace. She looked up. Her eyes were dry but devastated. You saw all that? I did. You're going to tell me I should have stood up for myself, that I should have thrown the coffee in his face, that I should have... I'm going to tell you that you're the strongest person I've ever met. Grace stared at him. Of all the things she expected him to say, that wasn't it. Steele lowered himself onto another bucket, groaning as his knees protested. I've seen men break under interrogation. I've seen soldiers lose their minds in combat. What you just did out there, taking that abuse without losing yourself, that takes a kind of courage most people never develop. It didn't feel like courage. It felt like giving up. No. Steele's voice was firm. Giving up would have been crying. Giving up would have been begging. What you did was survive. There's a difference. Grace was quiet for a long moment. Then, you made him come back tomorrow. I did. He's going to make my life miserable. Maybe. Steele met her eyes. Or maybe he's going to learn something. People can change, Grace. I've seen it. Have you really seen someone like him change? Steele thought about it. About the boys he'd served with who had come from privilege, who had learned humility in the jungle. About the men in his club who had been monsters before they found family. Yeah, he said finally. I have. It's rare, but it happens. Grace wiped her hands on her apron, then remembered what was on it. She looked down at the spit stain, and for the first time, her face cracked. I need to check on my mother, she whispered. Go. Manny can handle the tables. The bills, Grace. Steele's hand covered hers. It was rough-scarred, but surprisingly gentle. Go. Take care of your family. We'll take care of the diner. She nodded slowly. She stood. She walked toward the back door. Grace, she turned. Tomorrow's going to be different. I promise you that. Grace looked at him, this massive, terrifying man who had become one of the few constants in her chaotic life. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that tomorrow could be different. But 30 years had taught her that tomorrow usually looked exactly like today. I'll see you at 6, she said, and walked out into the fading light. Steele sat alone in the kitchen for a long time. His coffee had gone cold hours ago. His bones ached from too many years of violence, but something was burning in his chest, something that felt almost like hope. Because he had seen that look in Brandon Ashworth's eyes. The fear, yes, but underneath it so faint that the boy himself probably didn't recognize it was something else. Shame. And shame, Steele knew from experience, was the first step toward redemption. The kitchen door opened. Demon stuck his head in. They're gone. Watched them drive away myself. Good. You really think he'll show up tomorrow? Steele stood slowly, joints popping. Yeah, I do. And if he doesn't, Steele's smile was thin and cold, then we make good on our promise, and Richard Ashworth learns exactly what kind of son he raised. Demon nodded. The boys are wondering what to do. Some of them want to follow the kid home. Make sure he understands we're serious. No, we gave him a choice. Now we let him make it. And if he makes the wrong one... Steele walked past Demon toward the counter where his cold coffee waited. He looked out the window at the empty parking lot, at the sun sinking toward the horizon, at the road that led to tomorrow. Then we teach him what happens when you cross the iron wolves." He picked up his coffee. Cold as ice now, but he drank it anyway. "But I don't think we'll have to. That boy is scared, and scared is good. Scared means he's finally paying attention." The door opened again. Grace's regulars, the truckers, the travelers, the ordinary people who had witnessed everything were starting to leave. But each one stopped at the counter first. "You tell Grace we're thinking about her," an older woman said. "That girl's got more class than that whole group combined," a trucker added. "If that kid gives her any trouble tomorrow, you let us know." Steele nodded at each of them. "I'll tell her. And trust me, he won't." One by one they left. The diner emptied. The sun set. And somewhere across town, Brandon Ashworth sat in his car alone, staring at himself in the rearview mirror. His friends had scattered the moment they hit the parking lot, everyone suddenly remembering somewhere else they needed to be. Nobody wanted to be associated with what had just happened. Nobody wanted to be there when his father found out. If his father found out. Brandon touched his face. His hands were shaking. He didn't understand why they were shaking. He had done nothing wrong. He had just been having fun. The waitress was nobody. She wasn't a real person. She was just a waitress. But those eyes. God, those eyes. She had looked at him like she could see through him. Like she could see every shallow, empty thing he was, every pathetic insecurity he hid behind his father's money, every terrified little boy who screamed alone in his mansion bedroom because his mother was dead and his father was never there. She had looked at him with pity, and that somehow was worse than anything else. Brandon started his car. His hands were still shaking. 6 a.m. He had 12 hours to figure out what the hell he was going to do. Brandon didn't sleep that night. He lay in his bed, a bed that cost more than most people's cars, and stared at the ceiling. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. That waitress. Grace. The way she had looked at him after he spit on her. Not with anger. Not with hatred. With pity. At 4 a.m. he got up and stood in front of his bathroom mirror. The face looking back at him was the same face he had always seen. Handsome. Privileged. Superior. So why did it suddenly look so ugly? His phone buzzed. Derek. "Dude, are you actually going to that diner? Just ignore those bikers. What are they gonna do?" Brandon typed back. "They'll tell my father." "So what, your dad will just pay them off?" Brandon stared at the message. Derek didn't understand. Nobody understood. His father didn't solve problems with money, not the personal ones. Richard Ashworth solved problems by making them disappear. And if Brandon became a problem, he had seen what happened to his older brother Marcus. One scandal, one embarrassment, and Marcus was shipped off to a boarding school in Switzerland. Brandon hadn't seen him in 3 years. He couldn't become another problem his father needed to disappear. At 5:30 a.m., Brandon got in his car. The drive to Thunder Road Diner took 40 minutes. 40 minutes of empty highways and growing dread. By the time he pulled into the parking lot, his hands were sweating. 50 motorcycles were already there. Brandon's stomach dropped. They had beaten him here. Of course they had. They probably wanted to watch him grovel. He sat in his car for a full minute, trying to find the courage to move. Finally, he opened the door. Steele was waiting on the porch. 5:58, the big man said, checking his watch. 2 minutes early. Good start. Brandon said nothing. What was there to say? Come inside. Grace will show you what to do. The name hit Brandon like a physical blow. Grace. He was going to have to face her. Look her in the eye. Work beside her like nothing had happened. He followed Steele through the door, The diner was empty except for the bikers who filled every booth and lined every counter stool. 50 pairs of eyes tracked Brandon as he walked. Nobody spoke. Nobody had to. And there she was. Grace stood behind the counter tying her apron. She looked up when Brandon entered, and for a moment their eyes met. Brandon expected hatred, expected her to curse at him, throw something at him, refuse to be in the same room. Instead, she just nodded. "You'll start with dishes," she said. "Manny will show you the kitchen." That was it. No screaming, no accusations, just work. Brandon didn't know why that made it worse. Manny was a mountain of a man with tattoos covering both arms and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He handed Brandon a rubber apron without a word. "Dishes go in the left sink. Rinse first, then soap, then sanitize. Stack them on the rack when you're done. Questions?" "I've never washed dishes before." Manny stared at him. "Then you're about to learn." The first hour was hell. Brandon's hands, which had never done anything harder than grip a golf club, were raw within 30 minutes. The water was scalding, the grease was everywhere, and the dishes kept coming an endless stream of plates and cups and silverware that appeared the moment he thought he was finished. "Faster," Manny said from the grill. "Breakfast rush is in 20 minutes. I'm going as fast as I can." "Then go faster than you can." Brandon wanted to scream. He wanted to throw the dishes on the floor and walk out. He wanted to call his father and make all of this go away. But every time he looked up, he saw Steele watching through the kitchen window. So he kept washing. The breakfast rush hit like a tsunami. Brandon had never seen anything like it. One moment the diner was quiet, the next every table was full. Truckers, construction workers, elderly couples, families with screaming children, they poured through the doors like a flood. And Grace was everywhere. She moved between tables with impossible speed, somehow remembering every order, every modification, every special request. She refilled coffee before anyone asked. She calmed a crying toddler with a funny face. She listened to an old man tell the same story he had probably told 100 times, and she laughed like she was hearing it for the first time. Brandon watched her through the kitchen window, hands still buried in dish soap, and something twisted in his chest. How did she do it? How did she smile at people who didn't even look at her? How did she stay patient with customers who snapped their fingers and talked down to her? How did she give and give and give without expecting anything back? Stop staring and start scrubbing. Brandon jumped. Manny was right behind him. "I wasn't." "Yeah, you were. Every punk like you stares at Grace like she's some kind of puzzle. Want to know the answer?" Brandon said nothing. "She's not a puzzle. She's just good. Some people are just good and they don't need a reason for it." Manny's eyes hardened. "You're not good. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But you could at least try not to make her day harder than it already is." He walked away, leaving Brandon alone with a mountain of dirty dishes and the weight of words he couldn't argue with. Lunch was worse than breakfast. Brandon's back screamed from standing. His hands were cracked and bleeding. He had burned himself on the sanitizer 3 times and cut his finger on a broken glass. But the dishes kept coming. At 2 p.m., Grace pushed through the kitchen door carrying a tray of plates. "These need to be ready in 5 minutes. Table 12 is in a hurry." Brandon looked at the stack. There were at least 30 plates, all caked with dried food. "That's impossible." "Then make it possible." She turned to leave. Brandon's voice stopped her. "How do you do it?" Grace paused. "Do what?" "This, all of this. The customers, the hours, the... everything. How do you do it every single day?" Grace was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "Because someone has to. And because the people who come here, the regulars, the truckers, the families, they're not just customers to me. They're people. People who deserve to be treated with dignity, even if they can only afford a cup of coffee. She looked at him, then really looked at him, and Brandon felt stripped bare. That's the part you don't understand, isn't it? That everyone deserves dignity, not just people who can afford it. She left. Brandon stared at the plates. Then he started scrubbing. At 6 p.m., the dinner rush began to slow. Brandon had been on his feet for 12 hours. His body had never hurt this much in his entire life. His father's personal trainer had put him through brutal workouts, but nothing compared to this. Nothing compared to honest work. Steele appeared at the kitchen door. "Come with me." Brandon dried his hands and followed. The bikers were still there. They had been there all day, watching, waiting. But something had shifted. The hostility was still present, but it was tempered now. Like they were waiting to see what he would do. Steele led him outside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. "You survived day 1. "Barely," Steele nodded. "It's supposed to be hard. Life is hard for most people. They don't get to call their daddy when things get tough." Brandon's jaw tightened. "I'm not calling anyone." "No, you're not. That's why you're still here." Steele turned to face him fully. "Let me tell you something about Grace. Something you need to understand if you're going to make it through this week." Brandon waited. Her mother has Alzheimer's, early onset. Started when Grace was 22. Her father left when she was a kid, couldn't handle responsibility. So Grace dropped out of nursing school to take care of her mother. Brandon felt something cold settle in his stomach. She works 16-hour shifts 6 days a week. Every penny goes to her mother's care facility. She hasn't bought herself new clothes in 3 years. She hasn't taken a vacation ever. She does all of this, so her mother can have a clean room and people who remember her name. Steele's voice dropped. "And you spit on her." The words hit Brandon like a fist. He wanted to defend himself, to explain that he didn't know that he was just showing off for his friends. But the excuses died in his throat. Because knowing her story didn't change what he had done. He would have done it regardless. He hadn't seen her as a person. He had seen her as nothing. "I didn't," Brandon started. "Didn't what? Didn't mean it? Didn't think about it?" Steele shook his head. "That's the problem. You didn't think. People like you never think about the people you hurt. We're not real to you. We're just background noise." Brandon had no response. 6 a.m. tomorrow, Steele said. "Don't be late." He walked back inside, leaving Brandon alone in the parking lot. Brandon sat on the curb. The sun finished setting. The stars came out. And for the first time in his life, Brandon Ashworth felt truly, genuinely ashamed. Day 2 was harder than day 1. Not physically, Brandon's body had started to adjust. But emotionally, everything was different. He couldn't stop watching Grace. Every time she smiled at a customer, he thought about how she had smiled at him before he humiliated her. Every time she showed kindness, he remembered how he had repaid hers. Every time she moved through the diner with tireless grace, he saw the invisible weight she carried. Her mother. $12,000. 16-hour shifts. And he had spit on her for fun. At noon, a group of teenagers came in. They were loud and obnoxious, snapping their fingers at Grace, making jokes about the menu. They were exactly like Brandon's friends. Exactly like Brandon himself just 2 days ago. He watched Grace serve them with the same patience she showed everyone. He watched her smile when they mocked her. He watched her bring their food without complaint. And when one of the boys started to say something cruel, Brandon moved before he even knew what he was doing. "Hey," the teenager looked up. "What? Leave her alone." The boy laughed. "Who are you, her boyfriend?" Brandon felt his hands curl into fists. "I'm the guy who's telling you to leave her alone, so leave her alone." The teenagers exchanged glances. Something in Brandon's eyes must have communicated that he wasn't joking, because they went quiet. They ate their food quickly and left without another word. Grace watched them go. Then she looked at Brandon. "You didn't have to do that." "Yeah, I did." She studied him for a long moment. Then, without another word, she went back to work. But something had shifted between them. Brandon felt it. And from the way Grace's shoulders seemed slightly less tense, he thought maybe she felt it too. Day 3 broke something inside Brandon. It started with a phone call. He was in the kitchen scrubbing pots when Manny told him someone wanted to speak with him. His father's voice was ice. "I hear you've been washing dishes at some truck stop." Brandon's blood went cold. "How did you—" "I know everything, Brandon. Did you think 50 bikers threatening my son would go unnoticed? I have people who report to me. I always have people who report to me." Brandon gripped the phone. "Dad, I can explain. There's nothing to explain. You embarrassed yourself, and by extension, you embarrassed me. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand what I'm trying to build? I know you're running for governor. Then you know that every scandal, every whisper, every mistake you make reflects on me, on our family, on our legacy." Brandon closed his eyes. "I'm trying to fix it. By washing dishes." Richard Ashworth laughed coldly. "That's not fixing anything. That's performing penance for an audience of nobodies. Come home. Let my lawyers handle the bikers. Let my PR team spin this into something useful." "No." The silence on the other end was deafening. "What did you say?" Brandon's voice was shaking, but he forced the words out. "I said no. I'm not coming home. I'm finishing what I started." "Brandon, I don't think you understand the position you're putting me in." "I understand perfectly. I understand that you want to make this go away so it doesn't hurt your campaign. But Dad, I spit on a woman. I humiliated her in front of a room full of people, for no reason. Because I thought it was funny." His father said nothing. "That's who I am. That's who you raised me to be. And I don't want to be that person anymore." More silence. Then, "We'll discuss this when you come home." The line went dead. Brandon stood there, phone in hand, heart pounding. He had never said no to his father. Never. His whole life, he had been the good son, the obedient son, the son who did what he was told and never asked questions. And now? "You okay?" Grace was standing in the doorway. Brandon laughed weakly. "Not really. That was your father." "How did you know? You looked like someone was sucking the life out of you through the phone." She moved closer. "What did he want?" "He wanted me to come home. Let his lawyers handle everything. Pretend none of this ever happened." "What did you tell him?" Brandon met her eyes. "I told him no." Grace's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe. Or something softer. "That must have been hard." "It was terrifying." Brandon set the phone down. "My father doesn't hear no very often. And when he does," he trailed off. "When he does what, people disappear. Not literally, but they stop existing in his world. He cuts them out completely." Brandon's voice dropped. "I've seen him do it to business partners, to friends, to my brother." Grace was quiet for a moment. "You have a brother, had. I mean, I still do technically, but I haven't seen him in 3 years. He embarrassed my father, I never even found out how, and suddenly he was on a plane to Switzerland. My father acts like he never existed." "That's terrible. That's my family." Grace looked at him, really looked at him, and Brandon felt that same stripping sensation he'd felt before, like she could see past all his defenses, past all his walls, straight to the scared child underneath. "You know what I think," she said finally. "What? I think you stood up to your father because some part of you wants to be different. Some part of you knows that money and power aren't enough." She paused. "And I think that part of you has been screaming for attention your whole life, and you've just been too scared to listen." Brandon couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything except stand there, while the truth of her words crashed over him like a wave. "Get back to the dishes," Grace said, but her voice was gentle now. "We've got 3 more hours until close." She left. Brandon picked up the scrub brush, and for the first time in 3 days, he didn't feel like he was being punished. He felt like he was being rebuilt. Day 4, Brandon learned about the bikers. It started when Demon sat down at the counter during a slow moment and started talking. Not threatening, not posturing, just talking. "Steel saved my life," Demon said. 1971, Mekong Delta. We were pinned down taking fire from 3 sides. Everyone else in our unit was dead or dying. And Steel, he wasn't Steel then, just Marcus. He threw me over his shoulder and carried me 2 miles to the extraction point, with a bullet in his leg. Brandon said nothing. He just listened. "When we came home, nobody wanted us. Protesters called us baby killers. The government pretended we didn't exist. We couldn't get jobs, couldn't get housing, couldn't get basic human respect." Demon's voice hardened. "So we built our own family, the Iron Wolves. 50 brothers who would die for each other because nobody else in the world gave a damn whether we lived." "And Grace," Demon smiled. It transformed his face completely. "Grace was the first person in years who treated us like human beings. She didn't see the leather, the tattoos, the scars. She just saw us, people who needed kindness. So you protect her. We'd burn down the world for her." Demon's eyes met Brandon's. "And we almost burned down your world, rich boy. Don't think we weren't tempted." Brandon held his gaze. "I know." "Good. Remember that." Demon stood up. "You're not as bad as I thought, by the way. You've got something in you. I don't know what it is yet, but it's there." He walked away, leaving Brandon with more questions than answers. That night after the diner closed, Brandon found Grace sitting on the back steps. She was staring at her phone, and even in the dim light he could see the tears on her cheeks. "Grace." She looked up quickly, wiping her face. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." He sat down beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "What's wrong?" For a long moment she didn't answer. Then, "My mother's facility called. She had another episode today. A bad one." Grace's voice cracked. "She didn't recognize me. I was showing her pictures of us together from before she got sick, and she looked at me, like I was a stranger." Brandon didn't know what to say. Nothing in his life had prepared him for this kind of pain. "I'm so sorry. She's all I have left. My dad's gone. No siblings. No family except her." Grace laughed bitterly. "And now she doesn't even know who I am." Brandon wanted to fix it. Wanted to pull out his phone and make calls and throw money at the problem until it went away. That was what Ashworths did. They bought solutions. But money couldn't buy back someone's memory. Money couldn't make a mother recognize her own daughter. So Brandon did the only thing he could do. He sat there. He didn't offer platitudes or solutions. He didn't try to make her feel better or change the subject. He just sat beside her in the darkness, sharing the weight of her grief, being present in a way he had never been present for anyone. After a while, Grace spoke again. "Why are you still here?" "What do you mean? You could have left days ago. Called your lawyers, made this go away. Nobody would have blamed you." She looked at him. So why are you still here? Brandon thought about it. Really thought about it. Because I'm tired, he said finally. I'm tired of being the person I was. I'm tired of hurting people and not caring. I'm tired of... He struggled to find the words. I'm tired of being empty. Grace studied him in the darkness. That's the first honest thing you've ever said to me. Brandon nodded slowly. Yeah. I think it might be the first honest thing I've ever said to anyone. They sat together in silence until the stars wheeled overhead and the night grew cold. And when Grace finally stood up to go home, something had changed between them, something that neither of them could name yet. But it was there. Growing. Day 5 started with blood. Brandon was carrying a stack of plates when he heard the crash. He spun around and saw Grace on the floor, broken glass scattered around her, her hand pressed against her forehead. Blood seeped between her fingers. Grace. He was beside her in seconds, plates forgotten. Don't move. Let me see. I'm fine. I just got dizzy and you're bleeding. That's not fine. Brandon gently pulled her hand away. The cut wasn't deep, but it was bleeding heavily. When's the last time you ate? Grace looked away. I had coffee this morning. Coffee isn't food. When did you actually eat? Silence. Grace? Yesterday, maybe. I don't remember. Brandon's chest tightened. You haven't eaten since yesterday. I forgot. I've been distracted. He helped her to a chair, grabbed the first aid kit from under the counter, and started cleaning her wound. His hands were surprisingly steady. You forgot to eat. You forgot to take care of yourself. He pressed a bandage against the cut. How long have you been doing this? Doing what? Running on empty? Giving everything to everyone else and keeping nothing for yourself? Grace's jaw tightened. You don't understand. Then help me understand. Every dollar I spend on myself is a dollar that doesn't go to my mother. Every meal I eat could be part of her medication, her care, her comfort. Grace's voice cracked. I can't be selfish. Not when she needs me. Brandon finished bandaging her hand. He didn't let go. It's not selfish to eat. It's not selfish to take care of yourself. If you collapse, who takes care of her then? Grace stared at him. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. Since when do you care? The question hit him like a slap. Brandon released her hand. Since I started paying attention. Manny appeared from the kitchen with a plate of eggs and toast. He set it in front of Grace without a word, gave Brandon a look that might have been approval, and disappeared again. Eat, Brandon said. I'll cover your tables. You don't know how to, then I'll learn. Eat. Grace picked up the fork. Her hand was trembling. Brandon walked into the dining area. 12 tables, 8 of them occupied. He had never waited a table in his life. Steele watched him from the counter. Need help, rich boy? No. Brandon grabbed an order pad. I've got this. He didn't have it. The first table wanted their eggs over easy, but Brandon wrote down scrambled. The second table asked for extra napkins 3 times before he remembered. The third table's coffee order was so complicated that he had to ask them to repeat it 4 times. But he didn't give up. He moved between tables as fast as he could, apologizing for mistakes, writing everything down, trying to remember names and faces and preferences. His handwriting was terrible. His memory was worse. He spilled water on a customer's lap and nearly dropped a tray of pancakes. But he kept going. At one point, he looked up and saw Grace watching him through the kitchen window. She was eating. Actually eating. And there was something in her expression that looked almost like gratitude. Brandon smiled at her. She smiled back. And somehow that made all the spilled coffee worth it. The lunch rush tested every ounce of Brandon's new determination. The diner was packed, every table full, a line forming at the door, and Grace, despite his protests, had returned to work, bandaged hand and all. "You should be resting," Brandon said as they passed each other. "And you should be focusing on table 7. They've been waiting for their check for 10 minutes. Brandon cursed and ran to table 7. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Brandon was in the middle of refilling coffee when the door opened and Derek walked in. His former friend stood frozen in the entrance, eyes wide, clearly not expecting to actually find Brandon here. "Holy crap, you're actually doing it." Brandon set down the coffee pot. "What are you doing here, Derek?" "I had to see for myself. Everyone's talking about it. Brandon Ashworth washing dishes at some roadside diner." Derek laughed nervously. "I thought it was a joke." "It's not a joke, obviously." Derek moved closer, lowering his voice. "Listen, your dad called my dad. They're planning something. I don't know what, but I don't care what they're planning." Derek blinked. "What? I said I don't care? Whatever my father is doing, whatever scheme he's cooking up, it doesn't matter. I'm finishing this week." "Brandon, you don't understand. Your father is furious. Like really furious. The kind of furious that makes people disappear from family photos." Brandon thought about his brother Marcus, about the empty place at the dinner table that nobody mentioned anymore, about how quickly a person could be erased from an Ashworth's life. "Let him be furious." Derek stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "Who are you?" "I don't know yet." Brandon picked up the coffee pot. "But I'm figuring it out." "Brandon, you should go, Derek. This place isn't for people like us." "People like us. People who think they're better than everyone else." Brandon met his former friend's eyes. "I'm trying really hard not to be that person anymore, and having you here makes it harder." Derek's face cycled through several emotions. Confusion hurt anger. Finally, he shook his head. "You've lost your mind." "Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally finding it." So Derek left without another word. Brandon watched him go, feeling something he couldn't quite name. Relief, maybe. Or grief. Grief for the friendship he was losing, the life he was leaving behind. Steele appeared beside him. "That was hard." "Yeah. It gets easier, cutting off the parts of your life that were poisoning you." Steele clapped him on the shoulder. "But it never stops hurting completely." That night, the diner received an unwelcome guest. Brandon was wiping down tables when the door burst open. Richard Ashworth stood in the entrance, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits. His eyes scanned the room until they found his son. "Brandon, get in the car." The diner went silent. Every biker tensed. Grace's hand froze on the coffee pot. Brandon straightened slowly. "No. I wasn't asking. And I'm not coming." Richard Ashworth's jaw tightened. Brandon knew that look. He'd seen it directed at business rivals, at incompetent employees, at anyone who dared to defy the Ashworth will. But never at him. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to this family, to my campaign? The press is starting to ask questions. They want to know why my son is playing servant at some truck stop. Tell them the truth. Tell them their future governor raised a boy who spit on a working woman for fun." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Richard's face went red. "You watch your mouth." "Or what?" Brandon stepped closer. His voice was steady, but his heart was pounding. "You'll cut me off like you did Marcus. You'll pretend I never existed. Don't you dare bring your brother into this." "Why not? He's the elephant in every room. The son who disappointed you. The one you shipped away so you wouldn't have to look at your own failure." Steele had risen from his seat. The other bikers followed. 50 men formed a loose circle around the confrontation, not threatening, but present. Richard noticed them for the first time. His lips curled in disgust. These are the people you've chosen? These criminals. They're not criminals. They're veterans. They served this country while you were buying politicians and dodging taxes. Brandon, and that woman you called a servant. Brandon pointed at Grace. She works harder in one day than you have in your entire life. She gives everything she has to people who need her. She treats everyone with dignity and respect, even spoiled brats like me who don't deserve it. Richard's eyes flickered to Grace, then back to his son. She's nobody. She's everything. Brandon's voice broke slightly. She's everything you should have taught me to be. Everything you never were. Silence stretched between father and son. Brandon saw something flash across Richard's face. Surprise, maybe, or something deeper. Then the mask came back down. You have until the end of the week, Richard said coldly. When you've finished your little performance, you'll come home. We'll discuss your future then. I'm not performing. You're always performing, Brandon. That's the only thing I taught you well. Richard turned toward the door. End of the week. Don't embarrass me further. He walked out. His suited companions followed. The SUV's engine roared, and then they were gone. Brandon stood frozen in the middle of the diner. His hands were shaking. His eyes burned with tears he refused to let fall. Grace appeared beside him. Are you okay? No. He laughed bitterly. I don't think I've been okay for a very long time. Do you want to talk about it? I want to finish my shift. I want to do something useful. I want to be someone other than Richard Ashworth's disappointment. Grace touched his arm, just briefly, just enough to ground him. You're more than that. I've seen it. Brandon looked at her. In her eyes, he saw something he hadn't seen in years. Not judgment, not expectation, just acceptance. Thank you. Thank me by wiping down table 4. The ketchup situation is getting out of control. He laughed a real laugh, surprised and genuine, and went back to work. Day 6 brought a crisis nobody expected. Brandon was scrubbing the grill when Manny's phone rang. The cook answered, listened, and his face went pale. I'll be right there. He hung up and pulled off his apron. Manny, Grace appeared in the kitchen doorway. What's wrong? My daughter. She's in labor, 3 weeks early. Manny's hands were shaking as he fumbled with his keys. I have to go. I'm sorry. I have to go, Grace said immediately. We'll handle it. But the dinner rush. We'll handle it. Go be with your daughter. Manny hesitated for 1 second. Then he grabbed Brandon by the shoulders. You know how to flip a burger? I've seen you do it 100 times. Then you're cooking tonight. Manny pressed the spatula into Brandon's hands. Don't burn my kitchen down. He ran out the door. Grace and Brandon stared at each other. Can you actually cook? Grace asked. I guess we're about to find out. The dinner rush was a disaster. Brandon burned the first 3 burgers. The 4th was raw in the middle. The 5th fell apart when he tried to flip it. Orders backed up. Customers waited. Grace ran between the kitchen and the dining room, trying to hold everything together. Order for table 9-2. Bacon cheeseburgers, 1 with no onions. Brandon stared at the grill like it was an enemy combatant. No onions. Right, I can do no onions. He could not, in fact, do no onions. He put onions on both burgers, had to remake them, and by the time table 9 got their food, they had been waiting 45 minutes. I'm sorry, Brandon said when he brought out the plates. I know this is taking forever. The woman at table 9, an older lady with kind eyes, smiled at him. You're doing fine, honey. Better than fine considering. Considering what? considering you look like you've never worked a grill in your life." She patted his hand. "The effort matters. The trying matters. Don't forget that." Brandon blinked back unexpected tears. "Thank you." By 9 p.m., the dinner rush had finally died down. Brandon leaned against the counter, exhausted beyond measure. His arms ached. His feet screamed. He smelled like grease and failure. But they had done it. Somehow they had made it through. Grace collapsed onto a stool beside him. "That was the worst dinner service in Thunder Road history." "I'm sorry. Don't be. You kept us open. You kept us running." She looked at him with something like amazement. "2 weeks ago you spit on me. Tonight you burned yourself 6 times trying to cook for strangers who yelled at you for being slow." Brandon looked down at his hands. They were covered in minor burns and bandages. "People change, I guess." "No. People reveal who they really are when things get hard." Grace's voice softened. "And you, Brandon Ashworth, are not the person I thought you were." "What person did you think I was?" "A monster." The word hurt, even though he deserved it. "And now I think you're a human being who was raised by monsters. That's not the same thing." Brandon's throat tightened. "Grace, don't say anything. Just let that be enough for tonight." Steele emerged from the back room. He had been strangely quiet all evening, watching but not intervening. "I just got a call from Manny. His daughter had the baby. A girl, 7 pounds 4 ounces. Everyone's healthy." Grace's face lit up. "That's wonderful." "He says he owes you both one." Steele looked at Brandon. "Especially you." Brandon shrugged, embarrassed. "I just tried not to burn the place down." "You did more than that." Steele's voice was serious now. "You stepped up. When things went wrong, you didn't run. You didn't call your daddy. You grabbed a spatula and you fought." "I lost. Most of those burgers were terrible. Doesn't matter if you lose. Matters that you fought." Steele moved closer. "I've been watching you all week, rich boy. Watching you struggle. Watching you fail. Watching you get back up every single time." Brandon said nothing. "You know what I see now." "What?" "I see a soldier, not the finished product, you've got a long way to go, but the raw material is there." Steele's hand landed on Brandon's shoulder. "That's not something money can buy. That's something you earn." For a moment, Brandon couldn't speak. A soldier. Steele, the man who had carried wounded comrades through enemy fire, had called him a soldier. It was the greatest compliment he had ever received. "Thank you," he managed. "Don't thank me yet. You've still got one more day." Day 7. The final day. Brandon arrived at 5 a.m., an hour before he was required. He found Grace already there, sitting at the counter with a cup of coffee and a stack of papers. "You're early," she said. "So are you." "I couldn't sleep." She gestured at the papers. "Medical bills. They seem to multiply every time I look at them." Brandon sat down beside her. "How much, Brandon? How much?" Grace was quiet for a long moment. Then, 12,000. "That's just what's overdue. The total," she laughed bitterly. "The total is more than I'll make in the next 5 years." Brandon thought about the check he could write. One phone call to his accountant, and Grace's problems would disappear. It would be so easy, so simple. But he'd learned something this week. He'd learned that easy solutions weren't always the right ones. What if there was another way? Grace looked at him. "What do you mean?" "What if you didn't have to do this alone? What if there were people who wanted to help, not because they felt sorry for you, but because they believed in you?" "That's a nice fantasy." "It doesn't have to be a fantasy." Brandon leaned forward. I've been thinking about this all week. About you, about this place, about everything you've taught me. I haven't taught you anything. You've taught me everything. Brandon's voice was intense now. You taught me that respect has nothing to do with money, that kindness doesn't run out, that some people give and give and give without expecting anything back, and that's not weakness, that's strength. Grace's eyes were wet. Brandon, let me help you. Not by writing a check, although I'm going to do that too, and you can't stop me, but by actually helping. By being here. By supporting you the way you've supported everyone else. Why would you do that, after everything that happened between us? Brandon reached out and took her hand. She didn't pull away. Because you believed I could change. When everyone else saw a monster, you saw a human being. He squeezed gently. That's worth more than all the money my father ever made. The door opened. Steele walked in, followed by the rest of the Iron Wolves. 50 men in leather cuts filling the diner with their presence. Steele looked at Brandon and Grace, at their joined hands, at the tears streaming down Grace's face. Am I interrupting something? Grace laughed through her tears. Just a conversation. Good, because we need to have a conversation too. Steele pulled up a chair. About what happens next. What do you mean? This week is over, rich boy. You've done your time. The question is, what are you going to do with what you've learned? Brandon looked around the diner. At the bikers who had become something like family. At Manny's empty station waiting for him to return. At Grace, whose hand was still in his. At the life he had accidentally found while trying to escape the one he was born into. I don't know, he said honestly. I don't know what happens next. Steele nodded slowly. That's the first time you've admitted you don't know something. That's growth. But I know one thing. Brandon stood up, facing the room full of men who had every right to hate him. I know I'm not done. Whatever happens with my father, whatever happens with my old life, I'm not done here. I'm not done becoming whoever I'm supposed to be. Demon spoke up from the back. And who's that? Brandon thought about the question. Really thought about it. Someone Grace would be proud of. The room went quiet. Grace's hand tightened on his. Steele smiled. It was a rare thing, that smile, like seeing the sun break through storm clouds. Then you'd better get to work, he said. Those dishes aren't going to wash themselves. Brandon washed dishes until his hands bled. Not because anyone forced him to. Not because Steele was watching. But because for the first time in his life, he understood what honest work meant. Every plate he cleaned, every glass he dried, every fork he placed in its proper spot, it all mattered. It all meant something. The week had ended, but Brandon hadn't left. 3 days past his sentence, he was still showing up at 5 a.m. Still scrubbing, still learning, still becoming someone new. Grace found him in the kitchen during the mid-morning lull. You don't have to be here, you know. I know. Your week is over. Steele said you fulfilled your obligation. This isn't about obligation anymore. Grace leaned against the doorframe. Then what is it about? Brandon set down the plate he was cleaning. He turned to face her, his eyes carrying a weight that hadn't been there 2 weeks ago. It's about waking up and not hating myself. It's about looking in the mirror and seeing someone worth being. He paused. It's about you. Grace's breath caught. Brandon, I'm not expecting anything. I know what I did, I know what I was, but being here working beside you, watching you give everything to people who don't deserve it. His voice cracked. It's changing me, and I don't want that to stop. Grace was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. My mother remembered me yesterday. Brandon blinked at the sudden change of subject. What? I visited her after work. She was having a good day. She looked at me and said my name. Tears welled in Grace's eyes. She said, "Grace, you look tired. Are you taking care of yourself?" "What did you say?" I lied. I told her I was fine. Grace laughed bitterly. But for a moment, for one beautiful moment, I had my mother back. And I thought about you. Me. I thought about how you asked me the same thing. When I collapsed. When I hadn't eaten. Grace stepped closer. You were the first person in years who noticed I wasn't okay. The first person who actually cared enough to ask. Brandon's heart was pounding. "Grace, The kitchen door burst open. Demon stood there, his face grave. "We've got a problem. Your father's on the news." Brandon and Grace rushed to the dining area. The TV above the counter showed Richard Ashworth standing at a podium surrounded by reporters. The headline at the bottom of the screen made Brandon's blood run cold. "Oil magnate announces governor candidacy addresses son's mental health crisis." Mental health crisis. His father was spinning the story, making Brandon look unstable, explaining away his absence as a breakdown rather than a choice. "My son has been struggling," Richard said, on screen, his voice dripping with practiced concern. "The pressure of being an Ashworth, the expectations, it became too much for him. He's receiving treatment at a private facility, and our family asks for privacy during this difficult time." The bikers muttered angrily. Steele's hand tightened on his coffee cup. Brandon couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Treatment at a private facility. His father was telling the world he was locked away somewhere, that he was broken, that he was nobody worth listening to. "That lying," Demon started. "Don't." Brandon's voice was hollow. "It doesn't matter what he says. Doesn't matter he's destroying your reputation on national television." "What reputation?" Brandon laughed bitterly. "The reputation of a spoiled brat who spit on waitresses. Maybe this is what I deserve." Brandon. Grace's hand found his. "You don't deserve this." "My father is erasing me, just like he erased Marcus." Brandon's voice shook. "I knew it would happen eventually. I just didn't think... You didn't think he'd do it while you were watching." Steele had moved to stand beside him. "Welcome to the real world, son. The people with power will always try to silence the people who threaten them. I'm not a threat, I'm his son. You became a threat the moment you stopped being his puppet." Steele's eyes were hard. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Brandon stared at the television. His father was still talking, still spinning, still building a narrative that would make Brandon invisible. "I don't know." "Then figure it out, because if you don't control your story, someone else will." That night, Brandon didn't go home. He had no home to go to. His credit cards had been canceled, his phone service had been shut off. His apartment, the one his father's company owned, had new locks on the door. Richard Ashworth was thorough in his erasures. Brandon sat on the back steps of the diner, staring at the stars he'd never learned to name. He had nothing. No money, no status, no identity beyond the one his father was constructing for the press. "Room for one more?" Grace sat down beside him. She was holding 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you went home." "I was going to. Then I thought about you sitting out here alone and I couldn't." She handed him a cup. "Steele offered you the couch in the back room, the one Manny uses for naps. I can't impose. You're not imposing. You're family." The word hit Brandon like a punch. Family. He'd had a family once, a real one, with a mother who loved him, and a brother who looked up to him. But that family had been dismantled piece by piece, replaced with shareholders and press releases and carefully managed appearances. "I don't deserve that word." "Nobody deserves anything." Grace's voice was gentle. "We just get what we get, and we do the best we can with it." Is that what you believe? That life is just random? I believe that bad things happen to good people, and good things happen to bad people, and none of it makes sense. She took a sip of her coffee. But I also believe that sometimes in the middle of all that chaos, you find something real, something worth holding on to. Brandon looked at her. In the dim light with the stars overhead and the sound of distant traffic, she looked almost otherworldly, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with appearance. Like what? Like connection, like understanding. Grace met his eyes. Like forgiveness. You've forgiven me. I'm working on it. She smiled slightly. Ask me again in a few months. Despite everything, the humiliation, the erasure, the complete destruction of his former life. Brandon laughed. Fair enough. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking their coffee, watching the stars, and for the first time since his father's press conference, Brandon didn't feel hopeless. He felt ready. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Brandon was mopping the floor when a woman walked in. She was in her 50s, elegant in a way that money couldn't buy, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. I'm looking for Brandon Ashworth. Every biker in the room tensed. Brandon gripped his mop handle. Who's asking? The woman smiled. My name is Victoria Chen. I'm a journalist with the Washington Post. I'd like to talk to you about your father. Steele was on his feet immediately. No press. He's got nothing to say. I think he has quite a lot to say, actually. Victoria moved closer, unfazed by the wall of leather and muscle surrounding her. I've been investigating Richard Ashworth for 3 years, his business practices, his political connections, his family. Brandon's stomach dropped. His family. Your brother Marcus. Do you know what really happened to him? The room went dead silent. I know he was sent away, Brandon said carefully, to a school in Switzerland. There is no school in Switzerland. Victoria's voice was flat. Marcus Ashworth has been living in a treatment facility in upstate New York for the past 3 years. Not voluntarily. Brandon felt the blood drain from his face. What? Your father had him committed, claimed he was a danger to himself and others, paid the right doctors to sign the right papers. Victoria's eyes never left his. Marcus has been trying to get out ever since. He's been trying to contact you. Brandon's knees gave out. He caught himself on a nearby table. That's not possible. My father said, your father says a lot of things. Most of them are lies. Victoria pulled out a folder. I have documents, medical records, correspondence. Your brother has been writing to you for 3 years. Your father intercepted every letter. Brandon's hands were shaking as he took the folder. Inside were pages and pages of letters. Handwritten. Desperate. Brandon, please help me. Please come find me. Please don't forget about me. Oh God. Brandon's voice broke. Oh God, Marcus. Grace was beside him in an instant. She didn't say anything. She just put her hand on his back, steady and warm. Why are you telling me this? Brandon looked up at Victoria. What do you want? I want the truth. I want to expose Richard Ashworth for what he really is, a manipulator, a liar, and a man who imprisons his own children when they become inconvenient. Victoria leaned forward. And I think you want the same thing. I want my brother back. Then help me. Go on record. Tell me everything about your father's operation, his connections, his methods. Give me enough to bring him down, and I'll help you get Marcus out. Steele stepped forward. This could be a trap. She could be working for his father. I'm not. Victoria's voice was steel. I've spent 3 years on this story. 3 years of dead ends and silenced sources and people who were too afraid to talk. Richard Ashworth has destroyed lives, Mr. Thornton, including his own son's lives. gasped. She looked at Brandon. "I'm offering you a chance to fight back." Brandon stared at the letters in his hands. Marcus's handwriting so familiar, growing more desperate with each page. "Please, Brandon. I know you're out there somewhere. I know you haven't forgotten me. Please." "I'll do it." "Brandon," Grace started. "I'll do it." Brandon's voice was hard now. "My father took everything from me. My brother, my identity, my sense of who I was supposed to be." He looked up at Victoria. "It's time to take something back." The interview took 3 hours. Brandon told Victoria everything. The emotional abuse, the constant pressure, the way his father had molded him into a perfect replica of Ashworth cruelty, the night his mother died, and how Richard had told him to stop crying because Ashworths don't show weakness. He told her about Marcus, how his brother had been kind, gentle, artistic, everything their father despised, how Richard had called him soft, weak, a disappointment, how Marcus had tried so hard to earn their father's approval only to be discarded the moment he failed. He told her about the waitress, about Grace, about the spit and the bikers, and the week that had changed his life. "I'm not telling you this to make myself look good," Brandon said. "I did a terrible thing. I was a terrible person. But that's the point my father created me. He built me in his image, and his image is monstrous." Victoria nodded slowly. "This is powerful testimony. Combined with the documents I already have, when can we get Marcus out? It's not that simple. Your father has legal guardianship. He has doctors willing to testify that Marcus is a danger. My brother is not a danger." Brandon's voice rose. "He's a victim. He's been locked away for 3 years because he embarrassed our father at a charity event. He told the truth about where the Ashworth fortune really came from, and my father had him committed for it." Victoria's eyebrows rose. "What truth?" Brandon hesitated. This was the secret he had carried his entire life. The knowledge that had shaped everything he understood about his family. Our grandfather didn't make his fortune in oil. He made it in the 40s buying property from Japanese families who had been sent to internment camps. He paid pennies on the dollar, took their land, their businesses, their futures. And when they came back after the war, he had lawyers ready to fight them off. Grace's hand tightened on his shoulder. The Ashworth Empire was built on stolen property and human suffering, and Marcus was going to tell the world. Victoria was writing furiously. "Do you have documentation?" "My father destroyed most of it. But Marcus took copies before he was committed. He hid them somewhere. That's why my father hasn't killed him. He's still trying to find out where." "This changes everything." Victoria looked up with fire in her eyes. "This isn't just a story about a corrupt businessman anymore. This is a story about American history, about justice denied." "I don't care about history." Brandon's voice cracked. "I care about my brother. I care about getting him out of that place before my father decides he's more trouble than he's worth." "Then we need to move fast." Victoria gathered her notes. "I'll need a few days to verify what you've told me to build a case strong enough that no amount of Ashworth money can suppress it. Can you stay hidden until then?" "He can stay here." Steele spoke up from the corner. 50 iron wolves will make sure nobody touches him." "And after?" Victoria asked. "After the story breaks?" Brandon looked at Grace. At the bikers who had become his family. At the diner that had become his sanctuary. "After I'm getting my brother back. Whatever it takes." The next few days were the longest of Brandon's life. He worked the diner during the day, trying to keep his hands busy, trying not to think about Marcus locked in some facility, trying not to imagine what his father might do when he realized Brandon was fighting back. At night he read his brother's letters. Every single one. 3 years of pleas, of desperation, of hope, slowly dying. "I remember when we were kids," one letter said. "You used to protect me from bullies at school. You said you'd always be my big brother. What happened to that person? Brandon cried when he read that one. Long, ugly sobs that he couldn't control. Grace found him in the back room clutching the letter, and she held him without asking questions. I abandoned him, Brandon choked out. I believed our father. I let myself believe Marcus was sick, that he needed help, that sending him away was the right thing. But the truth is I was relieved. I was relieved that I wasn't the disappointment anymore. You were a child. Your father manipulated you. That's not an excuse. No, it's not. Grace's voice was gentle, but honest. But it's a starting point. You can't change what you did. You can only change what you do next. Brandon wiped his eyes. What if it's too late? What if Marcus hates me? Then he hates you, and you earn his forgiveness the same way you're earning mine, one day at a time. Brandon looked at her. This woman who had every right to despise him, who had been humiliated and degraded and assaulted, and who was somehow still here, still believing he could be better. Why are you helping me? Because you needed help. Grace smiled sadly. And because I know what it's like to feel alone, I spent years carrying my mother's illness by myself, convinced that asking for help was weakness. It almost broke me. What changed? The bikers, Steel and Demon and all of them. They showed up one day and just stayed. They didn't ask permission. They didn't make me feel like a charity case. They just became family. Grace took his hand. Family phantom isn't about blood, Brandon. It's about showing up. It's about being there when things are hard. And right now things are about as hard as they get. So I'm showing up. Brandon squeezed her hand. He couldn't find words for what he felt, gratitude. Shame, love, hope, all tangled together in his chest. I don't deserve you. No, you don't. Grace's eyes sparkled. But you're working on it. The story broke on a Tuesday. Victoria's article went live at midnight, and by dawn it had been picked up by every major news outlet in the country. Oil magnate's empire built on stolen property, son, speaks out, the headlines screamed. Ashworth family secrets exposed, and commitment scheme, how a billionaire silenced his own children. Brandon watched the coverage with the bikers gathered around the television. His father's face appeared on screen, stone cold, refusing to comment as reporters swarmed him. This is slander, Richard said through gritted teeth. My lawyers will be handling this appropriately. But the documents were irrefutable. The medical records Victoria had obtained showed clear signs of manipulation. Marcus's diagnosis had been written by a doctor who had received $3 million from Ashworth Industries the same week. The property records from the 1940s told a story of systematic theft that no amount of spin could erase. You did it! Demon clapped Brandon on the shoulder. You actually took down your own father. It's not over yet. Brandon's eyes were fixed on the screen. Marcus is still in that facility. Until he's free, nothing is over. The phone rang. Steele answered, listened, and his face transformed. That was Victoria. The state attorney general just opened an investigation. They're moving to revoke your father's guardianship of Marcus. Brandon's legs gave out. He sat down hard, unable to process what he was hearing. They're releasing him. They're releasing him. When Steele's voice was thick with emotion. Your brother is coming home. The room erupted in cheers. Bikers embraced each other. Manny banged pots together in celebration. Grace was crying, laughing, hugging everyone in reach. Brandon sat in the middle of the chaos, tears streaming down his face. It's over, he whispered. It's really over. Grace knelt in front of him. She took his face in her hands. No, Brandon, it's not over. Her smile was radiant. It's just beginning. Marcus Ashworth walked out of Pinewood Treatment Center on a gray Thursday morning. Brandon stood in the parking lot, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might burst through his chest. 3 years. 3 years since he had seen his brother's face. 3 years of silence, of lies, of believing the worst about someone he should have protected. The doors opened, and there he was. Marcus had changed. His hair was longer, streaked with gray, despite being only 24. His frame was thinner. His shoulders hunched in a way Brandon didn't recognize. But his eyes, when they found Brandon across the parking lot, were exactly the same. Dark brown, full of intelligence, and right now full of tears. Neither of them moved. "Brandon," Marcus's voice cracked on the single word. "Marcus." And then they were running, crashing into each other in the middle of the parking lot, holding on like drowning men who had finally found shore. "I'm sorry." Brandon was sobbing now, all pretense of control abandoned. "I'm so sorry. I believed him. I believed everything he said about you, and I let him—" "Stop." Marcus pulled back, gripping Brandon's shoulders. "Stop apologizing. But I abandoned you. I let him lock you away for 3 years. You were a kid. We were both kids, and he was a monster." Marcus's voice was fierce. "The only thing that matters is that you came back. You found me. You got me out." Brandon shook his head. "I didn't do it alone. There were people who helped. People who believed in me when I didn't deserve it. Then introduce me to them." Marcus smiled a real smile, the first one Brandon had seen in years. "I want to meet the people who saved my little brother." The drive back to Thunder Road Diner felt like traveling between worlds. Marcus sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at a landscape he hadn't seen in 3 years. Every few minutes, his hand would drift to the door handle, as if reassuring himself that it wasn't locked, that he could leave whenever he wanted. "It's real," Brandon said quietly. "You're really free." "I know. Marcus let out a shaky breath. "I spent so long dreaming about this moment, planning what I would do, where I would go, but now that it's here, I don't know what to feel." "You don't have to feel anything. You just have to be here." Marcus looked at his brother. "You've changed." "I had help. The bikers, them and Grace. The waitress." Marcus's eyes sharpened. "The one from Victoria's article, the one I spit on." Brandon's jaw tightened. "Yeah, her. And she helped you after what you did. She did more than help me. She believed I could be better, even when I didn't believe it myself." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was soft. "I want to meet her. I want to thank her for bringing my brother back." The Iron Wolves were waiting when they arrived. 50 men stood in the parking lot, arranged in a loose formation around the diner entrance. When Brandon's car pulled in, they didn't cheer or shout. They simply nodded. A gesture of respect for what Marcus had survived. Steele stepped forward as the brothers got out of the car. "You must be Marcus. And you must be the man who made my brother wash dishes for a week." Marcus extended his hand. "Thank you." Steele shook it firmly. "Don't thank me yet. Your brother still burns the eggs." Marcus laughed, a sound that made Brandon's heart ache with joy. His brother was laughing. After 3 years of imprisonment, after everything their father had done, Marcus was laughing. "Come inside," Steele said. "There's someone who wants to meet you." Grace was waiting by the counter. She had changed out of her work uniform into a simple dress the first time Brandon had seen her in anything other than the stained apron and worn sneakers she wore every day. Her hair was down, falling around her shoulders, and she looked almost nervous. Marcus walked toward her slowly. He stopped a few feet away and just looked at her. "You're Grace." "I am. My brother tells me you saved his life." Grace glanced at Brandon. I think we saved each other. He also tells me he did something unforgivable to you, something that should have made you hate him forever. Grace was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady. He did. And for a while I did hate him. But then I watched him change. I watched him struggle and fail and get back up. I watched him become someone worth knowing. She smiled slightly. Hate takes too much energy. I'd rather spend that energy on something better. Marcus stared at her. Then, to everyone's surprise, he stepped forward and hugged her. Thank you. For seeing in him what I always saw. For giving him the chance to become himself. Grace returned the embrace. He earned it. Every single day he earned it. When they separated, Marcus's eyes were wet again. But this time Brandon knew they were tears of gratitude, not grief. The celebration lasted well into the night. Manny cooked enough food for a small army. The bikers told stories, some funny, some tragic, all infused with the hard-won wisdom of men who had seen too much and survived anyway. Grace moved through the crowd, laughing and joking, more relaxed than Brandon had ever seen her. And through it all, Marcus sat beside his brother, taking in this strange new family they had found. I don't understand, Marcus said during a quiet moment. These people, the bikers, Grace, all of them, they had no reason to help you, no reason to care. I know. So why did they... Brandon thought about the question. He thought about steel and the code of honor forged in war. He thought about Demon and the soldiers who had been abandoned by the country they served. He thought about Grace and her endless capacity for kindness despite everything life had taken from her. Because that's what family does, Brandon said finally. Not blood family, real family. They show up. They fight for each other. They believe the best even when they've seen the worst. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I never had that. Not with Father. Not with the people he surrounded us with. Neither did I. Until now. How do you feel? Grace asked, standing beside him. I don't know. I thought I would feel satisfied. Vindicated. Brandon shook his head. But I just feel empty. That's because revenge doesn't fill you up. It just hollows you out. Then what does fill you up? Grace took his hand. Building something. Creating something. Being part of something bigger than yourself. Brandon looked at her. At this woman who had shown him what courage really looked like. Who had taught him that strength wasn't about power or money, but about kindness in the face of cruelty. I want to build something, he said. With you. With Marcus. With all of them. What do you want to build? I don't know yet. But I know it has to mean something. It has to help people. It has to be the opposite of everything my father ever stood for. Grace smiled. Then we'd better get started. The idea came from an unexpected place. 3 weeks after Richard's arrest, a young woman walked into Thunder Road Diner. She was barely 20 with a black eye and bruises on her arms that she tried to hide beneath a long-sleeved shirt. Grace recognized the signs immediately. She had seen them before on herself in the mirror years ago when she was too proud to ask for help. Can I get you something, hun? The young woman looked up with hollow eyes. Just coffee, please. Grace brought her a cup and sat down across from her. You want to talk about it? There's nothing to talk about. Okay. But if there were something hypothetically, I'd want you to know that you're not alone, that there are people who can help. The young woman's lip trembled. There's no one. I have nowhere to go. Brandon had been watching from the counter. Before he could stop himself, he was walking over. What's your name? The woman looked up at him with suspicion. Why do you care? Because I know what it's like to feel trapped, to think there's no way out. Brandon sat down beside Grace. My name's Brandon. I used to be a terrible person. I hurt people for fun. I thought the world existed for my entertainment. The woman's eyes flickered with recognition. You're the Ashworth kid, the one from the news. Yeah, that's me. Brandon didn't flinch from her gaze. And I'm telling you, if someone like me can change, if someone like me can find a second chance, then there's hope for everyone. The woman stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly the walls came down. My name is Sarah, and I need help. Sarah's story sparked something in Brandon's mind. That night he sat down with Grace, Marcus, and Steele to discuss an idea that had been forming ever since he first started washing dishes at Thunder Road. There are people like Sarah everywhere. People who need a second chance, but don't know where to find one. People who've been written off by society, by their families, by themselves. And, Steele asked, and I want to help them. I want to create something, a foundation, a shelter, something that gives people the support they need to start over. Marcus leaned forward. With what money Father froze all our assets? Not all of them. Brandon pulled out a folder. Before everything went down, I managed to liquidate some of my personal holdings. It's not much, maybe $2 million, but it's enough to start. Grace shook her head. You'd give up $2 million for this. What else would I do with it? Buy another sports car, another watch? Brandon's voice was fierce. I spent my whole life accumulating things that didn't matter. For once, I want to spend money on something real. Steele studied him with those hard, calculating eyes. You're serious about this? More serious than I've ever been about anything. And what would you call this foundation? Brandon looked at Grace. At the woman who had shown him that forgiveness was possible. At the sign above the door that she had always dreamed of hanging over her own place. Second chances, he said. We'll call it the Second Chances Foundation. The foundation launched 3 months later. They started small, a single building purchased with Brandon's money, renovated by the Iron Wolves, staffed by volunteers who believed in the mission. Sarah was their first resident, followed by a veteran who had lost everything to addiction, followed by a single mother fleeing an abusive husband. Word spread quickly. The story of the billionaire's son, who had been transformed by a waitress, and 50 bikers, captured the public imagination. Donations poured in, some small, some substantial, all meaningful. Marcus took charge of the administrative side, using the business skills their father had drilled into them for something good instead of corrupt. Steele and the Iron Wolves provided security and mentorship for the male residents. Grace trained the staff in the art of compassionate service, the same art she had practiced every day at Thunder Road. And Brandon did whatever needed doing. He scrubbed toilets and filed paperwork, and stayed up late with residents who couldn't sleep. He made no speeches, sought no publicity, claimed no credit. He just showed up day after day, putting in the work. 6 months after the foundation opened, Grace came to him with news. My mother remembered me again today. Brandon looked up from the stack of intake forms he was reviewing. That's wonderful. That's not the news. Grace's eyes were shining. The news is that Shady Pines called. The foundation's medical grant, the one Marcus set up, it's covering her care completely. I don't have to pay anymore. Brandon set down the papers. Grace, you did this. You and Marcus. You gave me back my mother. You gave me back myself. Brandon stood and took her hands. Everything I have, everything I am, it started with you. With your kindness, with your refusal to give up on me. I almost did give up. That first day when you spit on me, I wanted to quit. I wanted to walk away and never look back. What stopped you? Grace was quiet for a moment. Steele. He told me that sometimes the worst people make the best transformations. He told me to wait, to watch, to give you a chance to show who you really were. And who am I really? Grace reached up and touched his face. "You're the man standing in front of me. The man who washes dishes and changes lives and never asks for anything in return." She smiled. "You're Brandon Ashworth, and I'm proud to know you." Brandon felt something break inside him, not painfully, but like the shattering of old chains. The guilt he had carried, the shame that had defined him, the certainty that he could never be worthy of forgiveness, it all fell away. "I love you," he said. The words came without thought, without planning. They simply were. Grace's breath caught. "Brandon. You don't have to say it back. I know I don't deserve it. I know what I did. But I need you to know that whatever happens from here, whatever comes next, you changed my life. You saved me." Grace pulled him close. Her lips found his in a kiss that tasted like coffee and tears and new beginnings. "I love you too," she whispered against his mouth. "God help me, I love you too." 1 year later, they gathered at Thunder Road Diner for an anniversary celebration. The place looked the same as it always had worn: tables, faded photographs, a jukebox that only worked half the time. But the people inside had changed, expanded, grown into something none of them could have imagined. Steele stood at the counter, gray in his beard, thunder still in his eyes, but something softer there too. Something like peace. Demon and the Iron Wolves filled the booths, laughing and arguing about motorcycles as they always did. But scattered among them were new faces, residents from the Foundation people who had been given second chances and were making the most of them. Marcus sat in the corner, deep in conversation with Victoria Chen. The journalist had become a friend, a regular visitor, someone who understood the weight of exposing difficult truths. Manny was back in his kitchen, banging pots and shouting orders, his granddaughter, the baby born, during that chaotic night sleeping in a bassinet nearby. And at the center of it all stood Brandon and Grace. 1 year, Grace said, looking around the diner. "Can you believe it's only been a year? It feels like a lifetime." "A good lifetime." Brandon pulled her close. "The best one I could have imagined." Steele clinked his coffee cup against the counter. The room fell silent. "I'm not much for speeches," the old veteran said, "but I figure this moment deserves one." He looked around at the gathered crowd. 1 year ago, a spoiled rich kid walked into this diner. He was cruel. He was arrogant. He was everything we despised. Brandon felt Grace's hand tighten in his. But then something happened. He got broken down, built back up, forced to confront who he really was underneath all that money and privilege. Steele's eyes found Brandon's. And what we found underneath surprised all of us, including him. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. The foundation that kid built has helped over 200 people in the past year. Addicts who are now clean, abuse survivors who are now safe, veterans who finally got the support they deserved. Steele's voice thickened. "That's not nothing. That's everything." Demon raised his glass. "To second chances." "To second chances," the room echoed. But Steele wasn't finished. "And to Grace Mitchell, the woman who saw something worth saving when everyone else saw garbage. The woman who taught us all that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing a human being can do." Grace's eyes were streaming. Brandon held her tighter. "So here's to another year," Steele said. "And another after that. And as many as we get for as long as we get them." He raised his cup. "To family. To family." Later that night, after the celebration had wound down, Brandon found himself alone on the back steps of the diner. The same steps where Grace had cried about her mother. The same steps where he had confessed his shame for the first time. Footsteps approached. Marcus sat down beside him. "Hell of a year," his brother said. Hell of a year. You know Father's trial starts next month. Brandon nodded. He had been trying not to think about it. The prosecutors wanted both brothers to testify, to tell the world about the abuse, the manipulation, the imprisonment. I'll be there, Brandon said. I'll tell them everything. Are you sure it won't be easy? Nothing worth doing ever is. Brandon looked at his brother. I spent my whole life being Richard Ashworth's son, trying to please him, trying to be what he wanted. Now I get to show the world who I really am. And who's that? Brandon thought about the question. He thought about the boy who had spit on a waitress, convinced that money made him better than everyone else. He thought about the man who had scrubbed toilets and washed dishes, and learned that true worth had nothing to do with wealth. I'm Grace's partner, your brother, Steele's friend, he smiled. I'm someone who got a second chance and is trying every day not to waste it. Marcus nodded slowly. That's a good answer. It's the only one I've got. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. After a while, Grace appeared at the door. There you two are. Steele's telling war stories, and Demon is crying into his beer. We'll be right there. Brandon stood up and offered his hand to Marcus. His brother took it. Ready? Ready. They walked inside together. Back to the family they had found. Back to the life they had built. Back to the second chances they were still earning every single day. The diner door swung shut behind them, but through the window anyone watching could see the scene inside 50 bikers raising their glasses, a waitress laughing with the man she loved, two brothers who had survived the worst and found their way back to each other. Above the counter, a new sign hung next to the old photographs and faded memorabilia. Grace had put it up the day the foundation launched. Simple words on a wooden plaque painted in bold letters, respect costs nothing but it can change everything. Brandon had added his own words beneath it, the truth he had learned through pain and transformation and the stubborn love of people who refused to give up on him. And so can forgiveness. 3 years later, the Second Chances Foundation had expanded to 12 cities. Grace had opened her own restaurant, Second Chances Cafe, where the staff was entirely made up of people rebuilding their lives. Marcus had become a national advocate for mental health reform, testifying before Congress about the abuses that allowed his father to imprison him. Richard Ashworth died in prison alone and unrepentant, his empire dismantled and distributed to the Japanese families whose grandparents had been robbed of their futures. Steele passed away peacefully at 81, surrounded by his brothers, his hand held by the waitress who had treated him like a human being when the rest of the world saw a criminal. And Brandon Ashworth became something his father could never understand. Not rich, not powerful, not famous, just good. He ran the foundation's day-to-day operations, still scrubbing toilets when needed, still staying up late, with residents who couldn't sleep. But that he was saved by grace, the grace of strangers, the grace of forgiveness, the grace of people who believed he could be better before he believed it himself. And that grace changed everything. Because in the end, it doesn't take power or wealth to change the world. It just takes one person brave enough to believe that everyone, even the worst of us, deserves a second chance.